Go ahead, China.
Okay, so as I stated, good evening to everyone. I would like to thank everybody for being here. So today we are pleased to welcome Ms. Vonda Flute. She is our special guest from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Ms. Vonda is an occupational therapist with West Cal Cam. She also works with the Riding Center. And today she will be sharing with us her expert opinion on sensory integration. So with that said, we will give our full attention to Ms. Vonda Flute. So help me in welcoming her to our webinar. Thank you so much. Ms. Vonda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we
Okay.
can.
All right, I'm going to share my screen in a minute and we'll get started. I'm so glad to be doing this. It's kind of a heartbeat of mine is to talk about these things and sensory integration, maybe because I have things as well. And we all do. We all have some sensory issues, as we'll see as we go on. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on just a minute. And I'll get that and we will start. Let me find it. Okay. Yes, I think it's working there. Okay. So can you see the top? China, is that disappearing? There it went. Okay. Okay, it says that they can see. All right, so when I begin with the formal definition of sensory integration, it's integrating or organizing all of the sensory information we take in from the world every day, such as smell, touch, sight, sound, and movement. So, we have these 5 basic senses, but don't forget about the other ones, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. It is our understanding of the outside world, what we see, what we hear, how it feels to get touched. So it's not just looking out, it's actually some coming into us from like feeling something instead of us touching something. So it's all of that information. So I like this slide because it's got your 5 basic ones on the side, but then you got to remember there's body position, balance, our vestibular system, kinesthetic, proprioception, all those other ones that go in there as well. Now, I'm an occupational therapist, and sometimes that title is a little misleading because sometimes we think occupational therapists work with people who need jobs. But your occupation is not just a job. A child's occupation is developing. It involves everyday activities and interactions with the world through your sensory system. So, this is pretty obvious, but I'm going to go over it to give us this ground here. So this is the way, and I was reviewing the information on these notes because we've done this webinar quite a few times or in person. And I put occupational therapy utilizes a systematic way of helping individuals with negative sensory experiences and negative behaviors by helping them to, and I have these 3 slides down here. And I was sitting and thinking, this is pretty much, I guess, it is OT, but it's something I came up with because this is how I have done it for years. I'm an occupational therapist for, I think, 31 years now. And at the time, I work some at a therapeutic riding facility. And I work with basically a pediatric population while I'm there, and also an outpatient clinic. And we do adults and kids there. So this is kind of how I felt like I could convey easily what I do. So here's the nervous system. So as I said on the first thing I do is reorganize the nervous system. So here you can see it a little clearer. Here's all our input coming in. We've got data coming in all the time. That's what happens in our everyday life. There are things that we're not even aware of, and we're going to talk about that later. But that data is coming in all the time. The brain has to process that and have an output. Now, what that output looks like, sometimes when they're coming in for occupational therapy or they're needing, some assistance, that output is what we're looking at. Hey, this isn't correct. This is an over response. This is an under response. This is, not what we want. This response is inconsistent. Okay, we'll talk about that later. So that's a good graphic of what's going on. It's processing. Our brain is figuring out what to do. So you shouldn't have someone that gets a very light touch go ow and screaming, because that's an inappropriate one. But that may be what they feel. So if you have problems with sensory integration, normal demands become stressful. So the bright lights may give a person a headache. And we don't really think about that. I was working at a school one time, and I remember I worked 1 year, and the second year I came in and I went into the classroom where most of the it's not like a regular classroom, it's where they would, have some kids come and they could de-escalate and do some things. And I opened the door, nobody was in there, but they had the fluorescent lighting like most schools have, but they had these blue covers over them. And I'm telling you, when I opened the door, I expected, just to have a regular classroom. And I opened the door and nobody was in there. So I was able to just look around. They had actually like little turtles inside the little blue things. I don't know if y'all have ever seen them, but they covered the lights. And I immediately, I felt my body calm. It was as physical, tangible, visceral response. And I thought, oh my word, how amazing. So we don't think about things like the lights because we're probably used to them. But someone who has some sensitivity, those bright lights are going to give them a headache, and they're basically wanting to try to escape. So they're having some negative behavior. So I'm going to not go over all of these, but the humming of the lights are distracting. We don't hear that. Sometimes we don't hear it, and others do. Kids breathing is annoying next to them. Maybe there's a mouth breather right next to them, or just normal type breathing. People are laughing and talking too loud. Hey, we all have different volume levels. At the clinic I work at, there's one lady and she is very loud. And it was funny. I was talking with a kid and I got excited because she did her letters right. And I was like, yay, I'm so excited for you. And I was a little more, loud than this. And she goes, yay. And then she goes, Miss Bonnie, you scared me. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And she goes over to her pad and she draws me and her. And I've got lines coming out of and I thought that was so funny. She goes, "This is you scaring me." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And we talked about it. But she gave a visual representation of what my sound, it had tangible marks on the paper. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, it was a good visual representation. I wasn't over the top loud, but I was very excited. And you get very excited with children when they're doing something well. And so, anyways, they see and hear things sometimes a little differently than we do if they have it or if they're having some sensory processing problems. Seats too hard, clothes are irritating, teachers' words are too fast and too confusing, and maybe the teacher's talking and some other kid is humming next to them. Then there's two sets of data coming in. So it seems like normal everyday things to us, but they're being bombarded from different systems. And as I showed in the slide before, all that's got to come into the brain, get organized and come out, and also be filtered out. We know that because, like I say, sometimes the humming of the lights is happening and we don't even notice it. Sometimes it's really loud. So some signs of sensory processing disorder, they may cover their ears when loud sounds such as vacuums, hair dryers, etc., because, to them it's very, very loud. So they're not processing a sound that's not really that loud, but to them it is. And that's what we do in occupational therapy. I'll talk a lot about that in a little bit, but we work on those areas. It's not just desensitization. We're not just doing loud noises and they get better. What I look at as an occupational therapist is that whole body system. I don't think things, how to say it, I don't think too often things exist in isolation. I think that if you're looking at the whole person, they may be coming in because of maybe that one thing, which rarely there's one thing, but we find out that there's some other areas that they're sensitive. Maybe they're sensitive with their ears. They're also sensitive when you touch them. It's like, ow, that was a hard touch, and you were just tapping them a little bit. So they may have issues with food textures. Gagging is common when trying new things. Can't be touched or can't be touched enough. So that's the hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. They either don't want to be touched or they are roughhousing and jumping off things and crashing into the chairs and all kinds of seeking sensory input. They may show little or no reaction to stimulation, for the pain response may be off. So Alex, I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm going to ask you to look at that one on the bottom right, though. May have poor coordination. We are going to talk about that later, but that you wouldn't think that would be a sensory processing disorder. But remember, I talked about vestibular imbalance in the beginning. You've got to get feedback from your joints and your limbs. Okay, let me go to the next one. So this is an occupational therapist that was kind of the pioneer for sensory integration things, and says basically everything we do requires sensory integration. This normal process can be missing or very badly organized in some people, notably autistic individuals. So there we see that pretty common. It's just things are different for them and inconsistent. I'm going to say that word again. We're going to talk about it a little later, but inconsistent is a hallmark of sensory integration problems. Keep that in mind. This is my favorite slide. If you ask me if I only had to do like maybe 2 slides, this would be in it. I love this because, yes, it's kind of the same one. There's your eyes, ears, your skin, your taste, and your smell. And everything goes to the thalamus. The thalamus is kind of the relay station, the conductor that says, hey, it came in from the ears, it goes, and you see that blue line, it goes to the temporal lobe. It came in from the eyes, which is the red line, and it goes up to the primary visual cortex. But if you notice on the bottom left, smell. Smell bypasses the thalamus and goes straight to the olfactory bulb, which goes straight to the limbic system. The limbic system is where we store emotions. Smell is very powerful. I use smell, have used smell in my clinic, in my practice for people who need emotional regulation. And it's amazing how fast I can help someone, or smell can help someone to calm down and de-escalate. And in fact, as a facility that I was working at, we were using essential oils at the time, and I was having this. Especially, I remember this one day, someone came into my OT room, and I usually had like a chair that's kind of a rocker chair. It had not a base, but had a speaker. Sorry, a speaker inside the chair, and then I put a weighted blanket on them, and then there was a bubble tube behind. So we were trying to get emotional regulation, and to start out with, so that I could teach them things. Because if I couldn't get them calm, I couldn't teach them things. That it was just in one ear and out the other, quote unquote. So I would go over with different oils, and they smell, and they would just sit there and calm down. Beforehand, they were like, Miss Bonnie, can I tell you what happened? That they were doing this, blah, blah, blah. And they became like this. And I was like, hey, you remember we're supposed to be quiet for 2 songs and then we'll talk about stuff. And they just couldn't do it. So I went over there with the oils, and the staff looked at me and they're like, how did that happen? How did they calm so fast? And I'm like, if I could have showed them this graph, I'd have been like, because I hit the emotional center directly right away. So smell is super powerful. So it's like my favorite thing to talk about, but that's not all we have to talk about tonight. So we're going to go on. But this is a great graph. You see at the bottom there, I'm not going to go through all of these, but here's your registration of sensory information at the bottom. And what builds on that is all of these things that get to organized behavior. So you've got to have this arousal level to be alert and looking around and paying attention, and not paying attention like my AC just kicked on, not noticing those things. Motor skills, then practicing and learning and problem solving and praxis, and then you get organized behavior. But when they're coming into my clinic, guess what they're asking for? I need some organized behavior, or maybe some motor skills. And it's like, I get that, but we've got to see what's further down the line. So it's a pyramid of learning. We've probably all seen things similar to this. So in reorganizing the nervous system, this is something I said to pay attention to later, because this was told one day when I was at a continuing education course, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. Often children who find controlling their movements difficult usually find controlling their emotions equally challenging. If they aren't being able to control their movements well, they are probably not going to be able to regulate their emotions well. They are so tied together. And I feel like that's what I am able to do as an occupational therapist. Instead of just telling them things to do, we get to practice and we get to work on coordination skills, and I get to grade the activity, because they might be someone who feels like they're not coordinated at all. There's a lot of emotional things going on, but I grade the activity down to where they can have some mastery and competence, and then we slowly work it back up. And that's what we do. That's what we were taught to do as an occupational therapist, is to look at an activity and bring it down, let them learn it, master it, repeated practice. We don't just do it once. That's why they're coming to OT for several times. We're coming for a long time sometimes, but we've got to have those go together. Because as I said, I don't think things exist in isolation. So they're going to go hand in hand. And when she said this in that course, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be using that quite often. So we want them to be peaceful and regulate their emotions. But we need to establish the fact that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is internal. Removing the externals helps a lot, but externals can be tuned out if we have the resources to do that. I want to camp out on the last one here. Externals can be tuned out. When my AC kicked on, I attended to it for a second because I was like, ugh, right in the middle of my webinar. Don't know if they can hear or not. And then I've tuned it out. My neighbor decided to start cutting his grass. He doesn't know I'm doing a webinar. And so I noticed it right away, thinking, oh my goodness, is it too loud? And then I can now that I'm thinking about it, I hear him still out there, but I've tuned that out. If you have sensory processing problems, if you can't integrate and all of those things together, then that's really difficult. Your mind is pulled in a lot of direction because you hear a noise over here and you turn to look at it. You see something move and you turn to look at it. You feel your chair is a little uncomfortable, you move, and then something else happens. And that kid looks like they're either having bad behavior or they're inattentive or they're not wanting to learn. You know, we get all these classifications. So sometimes it's just about there's so much going on. So my job as an OT is I reorganize the nervous system. And it's not just about taking things away. I know we have accommodations and things like that for them in school, and those are fine. What my best request is that they may get those accommodations, but if they're in therapy, I'm working on maybe they get to the point where they don't need them. If they need them, that's fine. But I don't, you know what I'm saying? When they go outside of the classroom, I still want them to be able to take what they've learned and how to organize everything and put it in a different situation and in another situation. I'm not just looking at the classroom. So they may need those accommodations to get by now. We all have situations like that for ourselves where we need something for just a little while. We could say it like this: it's just a season. So that's what I want to do. Is peace is internal. I'm affecting someone from the inside out. As they learn and have success, and the way I've graded down an activity, their cells are super happy. Like the kids are just smiling and beaming. Not every time, I'm just saying, but when they've mastered something, they're so excited. They're like, yes. And then that gives me something to build on to keep trying to reorganize this nervous system. So here is my next favorite slide that I would keep. I'm going to let you look at it for a minute. Trying, I guess you're catching the chat. I don't think I can check the chat and not block my screen at the same time. So I'm seeing it come up. But anyways, this slide, all the blue down here, don't you just love it? It's basically what I showed before, but it's the bottom of the pyramid. You have all your primary sensory systems, but then you have some sensory motor development, like your body skiing. In therapy, a lot of times we work on drawing the body. Like, do they have their arms coming out of their head and their ears coming out of their arms? You know, how do they see their body? Because that tells me internally what's going on. I'm asking them to do things with their arms, but they, in their mind, think their arms are coming out of their head, or that's what that feels like to them. So it's a good representation. So we've got these things in the green here: ability to screen input, motor planning. That comes before you have the motor execution. Like that's a feed forward loop of what I need to do to reach out and grab the camera that's located on my computer right now and take it off without too much force. Or move it just a little bit so you can see me better, but not move it so far that it's out of range. So I've got a motor planning to reach out for that. So those are things that are here. Awareness of two sides of the body. Oh my goodness, you would not believe how many people in big people awareness of two sides of the body, and these cross body movements are these are those games we used to play, hopscotch and jump rope and things that helped us learn, you know, right, left, right, and we dance songs, all those kind of things. And then you go up into eye-hand coordination, which is, you know, maybe someone's having problems with that. But ocular, in the middle of that yellow, on the bottom row of the yellow, ocular motor control is big. That is the one that is very often missed. It's amazing how adaptive kids can be when their eyesight isn't well, but they don't know any different, and people don't really catch it. In fact, I was talking to the OT just recently, another OT, and was amazed at how well they were functioning. But I do a screen where they have to follow an object, and there's certain movements we do, and they couldn't do it. And in fact, the second time around, they just closed their eyes because probably their eyes were just like, I can't keep up with that. They were looking ahead, trying to guess. So the OT was slowing down so they couldn't guess ahead. And they were like, finally, they were done. Their eyes had started jumping, and then they were done. So that ocular motor control, that's also looking up to the board. So you're looking far away and you're putting your eyes down. So we have convergence and divergence of the eyes and trying to write what's on the board. And that's can be extremely difficult. And sometimes we take those things for granted. And again, if the child doesn't know, they don't know to tell us. So I know a story of someone who it was blurry, but they knew if they closed their eyes really hard and they opened up for a few seconds, they could see a few words, couple of words, and they would copy them down. Then they'd squint their eyes really hard, look up, get the next two words. That's a lot. And then what if something throws that off and they don't get to get the whole two sentences? And everybody else has got the whole two sentences because they didn't have to do all of that. That's a lot of stress in the system. So that's an area that's quite often overlooked. Postural adjustment is, I mean, it's as simple as crossing your legs. So you get weight distribution to the other side. But if they don't have good core strengthening, that's difficult. I'll go back to saying merry-go-rounds and teeter-totters and seesaws and monkey bars or whatever you want to call them. You know, all of those things gave us a lot of core stability. This is also why the legal age to start school is probably pretty higher than most of you would guess. Every time I ask this question, people guess. They do not believe that there's a lot of states that are 6 and 7 year olds before they're legally required to go to school. There's a few states that are 5, last I looked, and which was a while back. But kids need a lot of gross motor. They need a lot of gross motor. They need some falling down. And I know that's not a popular opinion these days, but it helps you. I have a book coming out, and I talk about, when you started riding a bicycle, you overcompensated. And then later, you undercompensated in the beginning because you didn't realize what's coming. And then later you overcompensated. And both times you end up on the ground. But then later, your mistakes served you well. And you learned how to go around a curve without falling down. You learned how to stop and put your legs down because a car was coming. Like you knew what to not do. So mistakes aren't bad. I mean, a lot of them on a bicycle probably have a skint knee. I have a picture with a skint knee. I don't know how I got that, but you know what I'm saying? So they helped me to learn what's an over response and what's an under response. And then if you look, let's go ahead and go up to the top 3, the red. That's where people are coming in and saying, hey, we have behavior problems. We have problems with school. We have problems with them taking care of themselves and their daily routine and at home and doing those things. And I get that up there, but that's just the top of the pyramid. What is going on way down here below? That's where the real work that's where the real work for an OT happens down here. Even reflex maturation, reflex integration is things that help us as a baby to survive, but they should not be maintained and they should not stay. But they do sometimes more often in a C-section baby than regular birth. So all right, so I'm going to go through a few of these slides, kind of show you, I got someone that comes in and they're looking at their daily living activities. They can't dress their self, they can't brush their teeth. I'm having a child right now that I'm working with brushing teeth, and what's their postural adjustment to this movement right here? Because as my arm is going around, can my body maintain stable and adjust to not only up and down movements, but side to side movements? Or does my head start doing this? When I go to a different direction, when I go the other way, what does my body do? So all of those things I need to know about. And I need to look at when I'm having a child do something so simple as brushing their teeth. And they're like, you just brush your teeth. And the child is like, I don't know how to go up and down and stay still. like, or their head movements are with it. I see that often. Their head movements are with it because they don't have this awareness inside of their mouth to be doing what they need to do. So we work on that. But I don't just put the toothbrush in their mouth and we don't just practice it. Like I do things like we have a shark's mouth that we brush their teeth, or I have a little Play-Doh mouth and we brush that person's teeth and they're oversized. And then Miss Vonda gets her toothbrush and I sit with them and I had great success with the other day. Instead of looking in the mirror, they were looking at me and I moved to the side and they moved mirror image. They moved to the other side. And then I turned my toothbrush around and they started watching and doing the same thing. So there's all kinds of ways besides just do the task, just do the task. There's a lot of things below it. So, postural adjustment, postural security, have they fallen pretty often? I ask that question a lot in my clinic. How often do they fall? Because if I've got someone who falls pretty often, that postural adjustment, no, it's not very good, but there's also a lot of fear in that system for trying new things. They don't want to move side to side with their toothbrush because they may fall over. I know that's an over exaggeration, but do you understand what I'm saying? They're not secure and stable. So you're going to see them refusing to brush their teeth when it's not about their teeth at all. Their teeth aren't sensitive. Their gums aren't sensitive. They could care less about the toothpaste flavor because you bought them. It's nothing about that. It's about something lower. And as an occupational therapist, when they come in, you've got these considerations like I would like to work on this, and then my job is to do testing to find out where is it breaking down further down the chain that is not allowing this up here to happen. So, and then awareness of two sides of the body. That I love to say that with a toothbrush, because they've got to go this side and you got to go the other side and you've got to do top and things like that. You've got to brush one side of your head and the other. And sometimes they're like, oh, this is the front, this is the side, and they don't get the back or the back left side, which would be the opposite side of their right hand if that's what their brush is in. So they have to have an awareness of both sides of the body. And of course, there's the visual and auditory part. So they're coming in for something. And my goal is in that red box. It's an activity of daily living is what we call it. I don't know why it's backwards on this slide, but they're coming in for something like that. And I've got all of these things to look at. Thankfully, they're not overwhelming to me because I can pull a lot in together when I work. But that's the beauty of what I feel for occupational therapy is when it looks like we're working on one task, I am looking at a lot of other things that are going on. In fact, there was a child that was stringing some beads, and I noticed that instead of just putting the bead here and the pipe cleaner and going straight in, they had actually buttons that day. And the button was sideways, and they put them in, and I started looking. And every time that button came up, they didn't hold it here and go sideways. They didn't have the visual acuity or something going on. And so I'm going to investigate further, but they laid it sideways so they could see it. That's something, you may not notice, but I'm thinking as an OT, why is that? And what's that happening for schoolwork? What is that affecting for schoolwork or for buttons on their own shirt? Because you look down and you try to button. We work on a button board on the table and it's flat. And that's great. But when it's on your own shirt, that's a whole different story, especially if you got a whole button down shirt, not just your two or three buttons for school shirts. And then, of course, the vestibular and proprioception. Can they feel the button well? I have some that don't realize that the button is certain directions. If it has different things that the feel in your hands to know this is off and this is not right. Because sometimes buttons have a ridge on the top. And so you're going to put the button on correctly. And we just look for those things. Is that a visual inattention or is that a proprioception inattention? So we've got all these things. Vestibular doesn't seem like it may work into brushing your teeth. But what happens when you have to pick one leg up to put it in a pants, or your shorts, and you don't have the balance? Your vestibular system is off. So you're frustrated, your leg went in wrong, mom's telling you to get dressed, we got to leave for school, and you fell over, and they're like, what, quit playing around. And the kid's like, I can't figure out how to put my leg through and lift up the other leg and stay stable. And it looks like they're falling around and playing. And I'm not saying kids are not falling around and playing, because that's pretty fun. And if you watch kids, they're going to do that. Like I remember one time I told a kid, here's the mat, there's a long mat, and I said, hey, will you go over and get those bean bags? Takes 2 steps and does a forward flip, gets the bean bags. And I'm thinking, isn't that so much fun? Like a kid is going to add stuff to it if they can sometimes, but it may not always be. They may have postural instability and they may have some vestibular problems and, vision and other things going on. So sometimes they come and they get a referral for behavior. Those to me are, I'm just going to say probably not all the time, yes, but sometimes my favorite because behavior comes from so many things. And I love finding out. I love finding out this piece of the puzzle. So, what it there, below behavior is their attention center functions, like being attentive to a task, sustaining attention. Now, listen, let's go back to visual. They're looking at a pen and paper activity. That means your eyes have to stay in convergence much longer to read that whole paper. Your eyes have to pull together to focus on the paper, and they have to keep pulling in. Well, what if those eyes get really, really tired? And another thing that the OT and I were talking about was this child does really well in school. The stuff is visual, but the teacher is talking it through. When they get home, you think, oh, they're just so tired and they just don't want to do anymore. But actually, there's no auditory anymore. And that visual, that's the child I was talking about earlier, that their vision was very not good, not fluid and smooth in their I'm trying not to use OT language, they're scanning side to side and in different directions, and there was no auditory component. So homework looks like it may be a behavior issue, but what if they really are having problems visually and homework is only visual? There's no auditory component anymore. They're done. They can't do that. So that's what we are trying to figure out instead of just looking at this behavior or behavior modification. Basically, why would I want to do something like that when they're having really, really having struggles? Ability to screen input. We talked about that earlier. What if they're trying their best to have those eyes focused on there, but stuff on the outside keeps catching their attention, and they're something from the auditory world is catching their attention while they're trying their hardest to sustain visual attention to the homework paper. There's the visual component. I just got ahead of myself, sorry, and the auditory component there. So we've got a lot that goes on. And then, there are, we talked about smell. Smell is really powerful, but we don't know. There are smells that I like and other people don't like. You probably have this all the time. Somebody loves their whatever perfume, and you're like, oh, okay. So to them, it smells great. And so that's a powerful component, and you don't know what's going on in that area. Okay, so that's basically back to the grid there. I want to, okay, let's go to the next one. And this is where I want to give you a couple stories. Oh no, we did that one already. I just want reorganizing the nervous system. That's, look at it again now. Look at all the things that we had. Clothes are irritating. Teachers' words are too fast and confusing. There's so many things that are, the sound of the bell is horrifying. They are watching the clock. I have those that are watching the clock so that bell does not catch them unaware. That is really bad. So they are having a really hard time attending because they're like, I started working on my stuff and 10 minutes went by and I didn't know the bell was about to go off and it went off and it caught me unaware. So we've got a lot of situations that are going on there. And again, accommodations are great, but I'd like to see what's going on if I could help in a different way so that they don't need accommodations. So if they go somewhere and someone honks the horn, they're not in a meltdown, you know. So this is Lorna Jean King. We talked about her earlier, kind of the pioneer of sensory integration, the occupational therapist pioneer. People need to be re-educated to understand that behavior is always communication. It is always telling us something. People often use the word behavior to mean bad behavior. Often the child does not know any other way to tell us. And I love that quote because, you want to know what their behavior was today? That is automatically cluing you to their bad behavior. So see how she says people often use the word behavior to mean bad behavior. There was one thing I saw recently where some guy, instead of asking how the day went, who did you help today? You know, thinking about behavior in a different way. So, anyways, that just came to my mind here because we often think of behavior as bad behavior, but often the child does not know any other way to tell us. And I had a situation just recently where the child um, possibly was having issues with their clothing. So they were ditching their clothing. you know, we don't know. They don't always know how to tell us. I remember I had one of my favorites. I know we shouldn't have favorites, but it was so much fun because he taught me so much. He was standing uneven with his feet, and so I was trying to get him to just put his feet equal. And I was like, "Can you put your feet equal?" And they moved their feet, and they still weren't equal. And I was like, no, like here, put your feet equal, like the front is equal, and they moved and they weren't equal. They may have been adjusted more in the wrong direction. And then I pointed down to my feet and I was like, see, my feet are equal. And the child stopped and said, Miss Fonda, I don't know what equal means. And I was like, thank you for telling me that. But that child had enough language skills to tell me that. Otherwise, they would have kept readjusting it and it would have looked like, you know, to someone else, maybe they're not cooperating. At their the PE teacher is trying to get them on the free throw line and telling them to be equal, and they've got all these kids going on. It looks like they can't do it or something. But he had no idea what the word equal meant, and so we worked on that for a little while. But behavior is telling us something, and we need to figure it out. I will watch a clinic. When a student in my clinic, a patient. I will tell my OT students, don't underestimate the power of observation. When it looks like I'm doing nothing, I am looking and I'm thinking, why are they doing it that way? Why are they grabbing that way? Why are they turning in that direction? What's going on? And that's my job. So the power of observation is really huge, especially like say for OT students, because they come in and they want to do and do and do and talk and talk and talk and put hands on and help them, not put hands on, but help hand over hand assist. And I'm like, sometimes just watch, let them have a little bit, a snippet of a free time and watch what they do and how they do it. And that sometimes can tell you volumes that will help you in your treatment. It is our business to find out what the behavior is communicating. Often sensory sensitivities are actually painful, and the child's behavior is an attempt to escape. And you're like, this is just the yellow shirt, and you liked it last week. And last week, I guess it was fine, or they just tolerate it or whatever. And they don't want the shirt anymore. So they look uncooperative. I remember having a dad, the child was discharging, and he said, is there anything you can do? And he said something about a piece of clothing that was cost like $12, and it was a pair of underwear that didn't have any seams in them. And we were talking about it, and he said, if I have to buy them for the rest of my life, I guess I will. I said, but they're super expensive. But that was something that couldn't be tolerated at the time. Or in certain levels, like up at their waist is like feeling like it's so much, but they'll pull them a little lower. That may be a spinal gallot. We want to talk about that maybe later. But sometimes there's something else going on. And again, even as a parent, step back and observe. You're their parent. You might see something that I don't see. You might be noticing something I don't notice. That's the value of having a parent come into the therapy session and spending time with them, is they'll say something. I'm like, that's amazing. You noticed that? I never saw that in the clinic, but at home they saw something. So having the parents there is great. And like I say, observation skills. No, they're not my OT observation skills, but they're your child. You're going to be able to see stuff. So by being observant, finding out what triggers the behavior, we can modify the environment and help the child find acceptable ways to cope, such as teaching them to wear earphones to protect himself from too much noise. As we use sensory integrative therapy to raise the child's threshold for arousal and provide calming inputs, we can see improvements in behavior. So basically, I'm teaching them to adapt and to that feed forward loop of, is something coming, and I can be more prepared. And it's so funny how some of these things work out without me hitting them directly. Again, I have a very big view. We have a child, I have a child that I'm working with now, that they were backing out of so much, and their behaviors looked so like oppositional defiant disorder. I mean, it almost looked like a classic oppositional defiant disorder. And mom and I just stayed in communication. She came into a bunch of sessions and there was just so much. And once that child shut down, it was like a 70s sit-in. I just, they would not, even if it was like, hey, this is a safety thing. So I was very, high alert on some of the things when in session, because of that. And I mean, it's taken quite a while, but they are so much more accommodating to new things or hard things. And I had to do a test recently with this child, and they did so much and they let me stop because it's a standardized test. And those are usually pretty difficult to give, to stay with the standardized, parameters. But it was so good because they were able to just let me say, no, that we can't do it that way. You have to hand it to the other hand. Nope, we can't do it like that. Normally they would have shut down. But all of this time, I've been working on the whole system, not just one isolated thing, and not just behavior. I've been working on their sensory system. Tell you another story in a minute, but that to me is the key. So, so we reorganize the nervous system. Then I can't know, I had to go backwards on there. But then you slow down and let them respond appropriately on the newly organized system is the next one. So they need to experience safe and calm. You can never teach or talk an experience. I know that's not a great way to say that sentence in one way, but do you get what I'm saying? Like the value of occupational therapy is we work through it. Instead of me telling them, hey, when you're overwhelmed, go practice deep breathing techniques. I actually practice numerous ones with them. I have a whole deck of cards of coping skills that they can do about their body. And we do bird breathing and box breathing and double breathing and all kinds of all names for all these things. The lazy eight breathing. And we work through them and say, which one did you like best? You pick one. Oftentimes we're giving the child something and giving them, and this is a great thing, and this is going to work for you, and this is a great coping skill. And the child's like, I don't like that one. So I spend time in the clinic finding out what works well for them, but I give them time to work through it themselves. A person who is in the Olympics has not done whatever they're in the Olympics for very short period of time. I'm not going to make it a time, but they've done it over and over and over again till they basically could do it with their eyes closed. And my best example of this is Michael Jordan. And there were all kinds of pool noodles. And it was kind of the first time I saw pool noodles at a basketball game online on TV. And so it was funny because there was all that distraction. And I asked my husband about it. They're trying to give this visual distraction. So what does Michael Jordan do? He picks up his arm, closes his eyes, boom, makes it. Like he had done it so many times. There's a poster my husband loves, and it's Boston Celtics, Larry Bird, and he is practicing. And there's all these banners of championships, and he's practicing when no one else is looking because they're over and over again. So you give them time to respond appropriately. Once we reorganize the nervous system, you let them feel what it's like. So this is one of those, a letter that someone wrote to me. I actually went up on a mission trip to another state, and I knew my husband had gone there the year before, that a child there that was trying to be in the basketball camp, but it was a little overwhelming. He had autism, and mom was, just trying to help him be there. So she sent me back a letter. Hi, Vonda and Ken. I wanted you to know how the sensory activities have made a huge difference in him. He has had times of being escalated, and with the activities, he has been able to de-escalate and maintain. His therapy team does it similar to what you did at Camp Vonda, quietly, without anyone noticing. He now knows cognitively how it feels to be calm. That's the best sentence. Once you teach them calm, their body will try to go back to it. It's not you forcing them anymore. It's not you trying to de-escalate them. Our body's always like calm. That is the first ever in his life. Because of that, he is now asking for breaks and more often, and also asking for the activities. Wow. It was an incredible week with him starting to identify his own needs. Praise the Lord. This is the first ever. He's also asking for it nightly too. Now we need to try and teach the school what to do. Y'all, full disclosure, I did very little. The mom said, hey, I've got this I can't, I know he has the sensory problems, but no one knows what to do. And so I did things with him. I did some things that like what went in and did some things like tapping on the faces like that. And mom and the aide that was sitting there was with their jaws on the floor, like he doesn't let you touch your face. And he let me do so much, but he felt differently. And now he responds differently. He knew what it feels like. He knows what it feels like. So this is what I said earlier about inconsistency. When they're responding, remember there's going to be inconsistencies. Aren't we all like that? But we expect the child to be consistent 100% of the time. There was a child actually in therapy today and in session in it earlier, and they seemed a little off. And mom was looking at me. I said, I don't think there's anything to be alarmed about. It might be just an off day. Let's see what happens later. But the child just seemed to be a little off today. I don't know. So that's going to happen. But I say this, and this is a huge point. They can sometimes achieve calm, but they don't know how to maintain it. And but what happens is people say, well, they did it before. They did it before, so they know how. Not always. Because you know what? To get calm, 2 plus 2 has to equal 4. Let's just make that scenario. Well, 2 plus 2 is equal so many different things besides 4. They don't even know which one's right. And I made this little graph. 2 plus 2 equals 5 or 17 or 794. 2 plus 2 might equal negative 30. They don't know how to achieve calm, but they might have got it one day. And now you say, you can do it. I know you can do it. No, they don't really know how to get back there. So remember what that slide before, I'm sorry, I don't know how to go backwards on slides, but he can de-escalate and maintain it. That's my other goal, is helping them maintain how to get whatever it is, whether it's de-escalating or any other things that we're working on in therapy. I am a big one to work on being calm. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. There's that little quote I picked up Facebook, but I put on the right-hand side here. Once the irrational is turned off, it allows listening and processing to occur. Okay, here's my story. I know we don't have much time left, but I have a couple of scenarios in my book, my upcoming book. It's not on OT, but it was funny because these two patients kind of encapsulated what the point I was trying to get across. And one child was at a facility and had significant medical and behavioral problems. And I did a lot of sensory integration work for a while, but then I actually had a car accident and I couldn't do a lot of the things. So I slowed down and did a certain program. And it's not about the program, but in that next 6 months, the gains that were made were astronomical. Like, couldn't buy a bucket, is what they said. So they couldn't in basketball make a hoop to save their life. Started making 3-pointers, left the facility, and made the high school basketball team. What I worked on, because I didn't have many other options, was calm. They also could start threading their belt loops. I didn't know they weren't doing that. They didn't tell me that in the beginning. And that's a fine motor. I might have worked on fine motor before if I would have thought about it, and known about it. But I just fed the body peace and calm in not even massive doses because I couldn't go like I was going before. But the motor skills started improving once I got emotional regulation. That, and then there's another story, but I know we're running out of time. But the limbic system is where we process emotions. Remember, I said smell goes straight to the limbic lobe. The limbic system also governs our appetite, libido, sleep cycles, and bonding. If the limbic system gets thrown out of balance through too much stress, it can make regulating our appetites and our moods more difficult. We know that, okay? When we lose the capacity to regulate our uncomfortable emotions ourselves, when too much uncontrollable stress makes it hard for us to find our own balance, after an upset, we may turn to something outside of ourselves to soothe our frayed feelings. It's natural. That's a long statement to say you're not yourself when you're hungry. You know that commercial? But basically, when you're thrown out of balance, everything else is, you internally can't do it. So you reach for something. You're going to reach for that cup of coffee. You're going to reach for that Coke. You're going to reach for that Snickers bar. You're going to reach for that sugar. You're going to reach for something, or you're going to go outside and take a walk. Like, you're going to do something, or a hot bath. But children often don't have all of those things to choose from. They can't go take a hot bath when they want to. They can't go take a walk outside when they want to. They can't get what they want out of the refrigerator anytime. I mean, it's just common. There's glass things in there. Do we want them going and getting their own stuff out of there and maybe breaking something? And I'm just trying to be, show some examples here, but they can't do that as much. So they're left with trying to manage a lot of stress internally. So in OT, what we do, I've had them make coping skills books, and they pick what they can do and what they like and what works for their body. And that's what they can choose. And they can go over that with the parent and say, these are the things I would like to do when I'm stressed. We give them options and put some power back in their hand. We do it, and as an adult, I try to give them as much back as I can as a kid. And then this was really good. I wanted to comment on food, and I got it from a mom who was on a feed, and I didn't think about grabbing her name, and so I just put an unknown mom later. I wanted to comment on food intolerances and sensory integration. For the past 25 years, I've been researching and trying everything to help my children and I with food intolerances, and ended up being stressed by all the diets. Each child had different intolerances and foods to buy, prepare, medicine, supplements to take at different times, etc. I was getting worse. So I started tracing digestion backwards. Mic drop, mama. To sum it up, what I discovered, it all came down to the nervous system being safe and calm. When we are in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, and the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, digestion stops. As it takes about 24 hours to have the system fully recoup from the initial surge of hormones, most people live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. Wow. Look what I just to pull these out. Eventually, it leads to complete exhaustion of the nervous system. A balanced nervous system is able to respond when needed and not react to everything. Like she just summarized a lot of what I just said. Like a balanced nervous system. That's what I'm trying to get for them in the clinic. So when we respond appropriately, I take my time. We've got time in session, and then we've got months and months and months. And I involve other people. I talk to you about the parents coming into the session. I love that. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But we work with whatever way. If we need input from the teachers, how are they acting at school? Can we get feedback back and forth? The caregivers, siblings, I've had to work one time before because it was a lot of sibling things going on. So we worked on that, and then other professionals. So that's just an overview, because I'm not the only piece of the puzzle. There's a lot else going on besides they're 2 times a week or 1 time a week with me for 30 minutes to an hour. Here's a couple of books that are really good. The Out of Sync Child actually has a book that's called The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. It's a really good book written by a first grade teacher who had an OT come into her classroom. And so it's written, I give it to parents all the time or recommend it because it's written not like an OT would write it. Like I did earlier, I was trying to unsay some words that I'm used to saying, some lingo. And so it's written really well, and it has little tests that you can take in there to find out. So I tell people do this book, try the stuff. Try the book that goes with it, the companion book that has activities. And then if you need some help, come to an OT. But that's a really good book. And then the other one is A Buffet of Sensory Interventions, but it's geared towards middle and high school students. The other one, and it's on the autism spectrum, but the other one is more with kids and overall, I guess. But so look, this is the happy face. Woo! The sensory inputs are coming in, and we have a more adaptive response now. If only I could tell you so many stories, but there was one child at the barn, and they hated so many things. Same child I was talking about before, but the smell, and it's a barn. It's a barn. But we try to keep it where it's not smelling horrible. It's a facility that we got to treat patients at, so it doesn't smell horrible, but it's a barn. And they would hold their nose for so many times. And not long ago, they were walking everywhere and never even acted like they were gonna, just walking, talking, and doing everything else. Like, it's so cool to see it all come together and see an amazing response. Like I say, it's a barn, and they made a great response for the smell. So my desires for them, we're wrapping up, to experience joy and peace, changes which are possible when sensory integration changes them from the inside out. Because when I'm doing stuff, dopamine is being released, the feel-good chemical, serotonin is being released. When I'm doing, a certain technique with their hand and fingers, I'm releasing dopamine in their body because we get that by touch. And you know what? That's a feel-good chemical. So I'm not just doing externals. I'm doing things that change them from the inside out. When they get success because I've downgraded that task to a level that I know that they can have some mastery, like the slide before, you should see their face beaming. They're just beaming because they got success, whereas they looked awkward and silly or maybe have been laughed at in another situation. And it's so good because then they've got all kinds of things going and all kinds of chemicals going from the inside out. So we're pretty much at our time. Question and comments. I have my website there. I'm sorry. It used to have more OT, used to have OT stuff on it. It's since changed, but it is there. So I will stop sharing and we will take any questions and I'll look at the comments or China if you have anything. Let me see. Not sure how to stop sharing.
If y'all have any questions for Ms. Vonda, this is the time to ask.
I'm still sharing. I'll figure it out while we're talking.
No, you're good.
No, you're not sharing anymore, Ms.
Oh, I'm
Vonda.
not? Okay,
Uh-uh.
No,
good.
you're good.
Okay, good.
So any questions? Thank you for hosting. That's from Miss Karen. I know Miss Precious had asked if they could steal you to St. Charles Parish. I told her that was a no-no.
So that was a no. Someone said on IEP.
Suggestions for anxiety.
Is the I mean, I'm just going to give some scenarios because I don't know if the child's verbal and nonverbal, but you know, it's amazing. I'll phrase it like this. I have a child who's pretty much nonverbal and a lot of anxiety and wants to do his own thing. And there were some changes in the schedule and a thing we had a while back. And I just sat down and talked with them and I explained the situation. And even though they're not verbal and I don't know, you know, how much they comprehend, it was amazing that they were calm and they got back into doing things with us. But another thing for anxiety that I find on various situations is what's your anxiety level? Like kids co-regulate. Like they're looking at you to see what's normal. They're looking at you to see how you respond to a situation. They're looking at you when something unexpected happens and how you respond. So a big part that maybe you can start at is what is your level? And I'm not saying that in any way just to say check your levels because I have to do that a lot is talk with parents about what's going on with their situation because they're modeling and what's that I was saying more is caught than taught. So they're looking at us to see how things go. So I'm modeling a lot in my clinic. So check that first for anxiety. Good sleep. That's the second thing I'll say. I'm throw that. If I can't help the parents capture sleep, there's a lot of behavior during the day that it's hard for me to catch up on because sleep is so in it's major and we don't think about it. And I work with sleep as an occupational therapy. That's one of the domains of practice. So sleep would be another thing for anxiety during the day.
Okay. Is 30 minutes a month honestly enough for a child diagnosed with autism, global development delay, and for sure have sensory issues with a school of OT? With school receiving OT. Yeah.
School OT. My understanding is occupational therapy in the school is educational based, not treatment based. It's not a medical model. So you're going to get more of what needs to be done for the IEP and the accommodations. But medical happens in a clinic, and so that's the difference there. So it's only 30 minutes, but it's educational. I think it's Title IV monies, if I remember correctly. So it's different. And hey, some of those things can work well, but it's not a medical model. It's not treatment.
Okay. What type of education do you suggest for us parents?
Those books are extremely helpful. In fact, sometimes when they're in my clinic, I say, hey, go read this book. So you and I can start talking the same lingo really, really fast. You know, that the Out of Sync Child, that's an amazing one. Temple Grandin is an amazing resource. She is verbal and says a lot. Like she even has a movie out, and that explains a lot. But those books, I'm trying to think of anything else, and get in a network with some other parents that have children with sensory problems. See if there's, Facebook groups with parents or professionals that have. No, I don't think I'm in any sensory Facebook ones, but those books and networking.
Okay. Any others? Any other questions? Okay. So I do not see any. Such a great presentation. Thank you, Ms. Vonda.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Seems like
All
it always
right.
runs out of time, but hopefully it was something valuable and learning some new things.
Yes, yes, I know. So thank you, Ms. Vonda, for all the good information. It was very useful for our families and the families that we serve. Wallace has been assisting me in getting the information out. He did post in the chat about the information about McCann, and he's been posting information about the surveys as well. Just to let y'all know, he will also be sending out the PowerPoint, the survey links, and certificates as well when the webinar is over. I did see someone ask about the recording. He did put that information in the chat as well. So I appreciate everyone for taking the time out of their busy day to be here with us. And I hope to see you on our next webinar. You will be finding a listing of our webinars and our upcoming workshops on our Facebook page and on our Families Helping Families website. So please do y'all survey and enjoy y'all evening and enjoy your Labor Day holiday. Thank y'all
Yes.
so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Enjoy your evening. Bye.